welcome back to the Salsa.Sol.Food YouTube channel where we dive into all things health and wellness. And today we're going to get into one of my favorite topics, which is travel. Of course, we really cannot travel during this time, but I wanted to share some special stories from abroad. And in this video, I'm going to describe 5 surprising things that I learned from living in the Republic of Moldova. To give you a little bit of background, Moldova is a country in between Romania and Ukraine. It's in Eastern Europe, and previously it was a part of the Soviet Union, and they gained their independence in 1991. I was there as a Peace Corps volunteer teaching health education in a small village of about 3,000 to 4,000 people. It was named Opach. It's called Opach. And again, my perspective, of course, is as an American and from somebody who is living in a village. So I understand that throughout the country, things can vary. And of course, if you are from and born in the city, what I'm saying might be something that you can connect with, but it might not be something that you completely agree with. So I'd love to hear in the comments if someone has something different to say. So number 1, something that was surprising to me is that bread is a staple food. So I remember, eating my breakfast, I'd have oats, but then there'd be like bread right next to it. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Then at lunch, when I would go to have lunch at my school, I was lucky enough to be able to eat the lunch with the kids. And then you would get your tea and then you'd get bread. And I remember when I wouldn't take bread, everyone would just zoom in on me and just stare and say, oh, are you trying to maintain your figure? What's the reason? And so it was interesting and funny that it caused like this big scene. And I soon realized it's because it's a really big part of their culture, the act of making the bread and giving it. And then for holidays as well, there's a lot of delicious breads that my host mother would make. One of my favorite snacks was when she would make fresh bread, and I would just put the fresh butter on it and the honey that she had bought from the neighbors with a cup of tea. It was just so delicious. And the other thing that was interesting is that in the States, we typically have garlic bread or a bread that has a sauce or butter, I meant to say, or jam, right? Which they do use, but typically if you have a bowl of soup, someone will just be eating the bread plain bread right next to it. It's almost as if you take a bite of your food and then you put a piece of just the plain white bread in your mouth. So that was a little bit of a difference. It was almost as if the bread was almost like a utensil. And of course they dip it in sauces as well, like everyone else. But it was surprising because I didn't really know what to expect food-wise in Eastern Europe. And I think when we think of bread and pasta, we always kind of think of the stereotype is Italians, right? And I grew up, Italian American. Of course, we eat a lot of bread as well. But I never thought oh, Moldova, I'm going to be eating a lot of bread. So I just thought that would be a fun one to share. Number 2 is the chicken jelly soup, or in Romanian, racitură. And I first encountered this. So we had language courses and cultural courses to learn the language, of course, and to be integrated. And that was given or provided by the Peace Corps. When I first visited my site or my village, I went to my director's house, the school director's home. And she gave me some tea and some cookies, which is also very common there. It was really nice, very sweet. And of course, I'm on edge because you're nervous. You're in someone's home for the first time, speaking a different language. And then she pulls something out of her fridge. And it comes on the table. And I'm like, there it is, the jellied chicken soup. And I ate it. I wanted to be polite. I was still in the very beginning stages of my service, so I wanted to try everything. I wanted to be open. But it was just odd because I had just eaten cookies, which are sweet, and a hot tea. And she pulls out a cold soup from the fridge. And what happened was with this soup, she didn't really cover it. So it had absorbed other flavors that were in the fridge. And I was just like, God, just do it. Just eat it. And so, of course, for many Americans, Jell-O, like gelatin in general, is served sweet. So that was why, for most volunteers, it wasn't one of our favorites. But we obviously understood why, it was part of their tradition. And for all holidays, you have racitură and it's on the table, and my host parents would save it after holidays. Whatever was left over, they would then eat it for breakfast. And of course, it's made from the gelatin from the bones, and so of course it's really good for you and packed with nutrients. And so I felt guilty for not really liking it because I knew it had great health benefits, but just wasn't my thing. So yeah, rachitura. Number 3 is that you are expected to pay for your plate at a wedding, right? So I had to go to a wedding my first August in Moldova. And I overheard my host parents talking, and they were kind of saying like, oh, how much money should we put down? And I was like, what's going on here? Because I was going, so I'm like, I have to know how much money I have to give. And again, we were taught this in our classes, but it's always different being taught something and then experiencing it, right? So I think for this wedding, for example, that we went to is very, very nice, very extravagant. And in general, weddings in Moldova, I would say, are probably one of the largest events, like in most cultures. Right? And they last, I think this one started, we got there maybe at like 2 and we went home at like 6 or 7 a.m. So it's very, very long. And so money, like I feel like weddings in the United States, depending on your background and your culture, they don't typically last that long, right? But of course they can. And so it's definitely important that you're providing enough money, and it's seen, I think, as a gift, but also that you're showing that like you're thanking them and you're showing that you understand that they were providing for you. And I believe people that were closest to the bride and groom or in the wedding party also gave additional gifts. So I ended up giving, I believe, around 400 lei, which was definitely on the lower side. And my host said, I remember when I gave it to him, he said, that's fine because you're single, so it's okay. So it was just funny to me. But it's interesting because in the United States, I feel like, we give gifts. We give money as well, which technically could cover the costs of the wedding overall. But I think we also kind of think of it as we're just giving this gift to celebrate the bride and groom. We're not necessarily talking about like how much it costs per plate. And again, my family doesn't do that. Other people may, but I thought it was very interesting and also very practical to be respectful of how much money they're putting into it because it's very costly. So it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now number 4. There is a holiday in Moldova where you eat at the cemetery. So I think in the United States, typically cemeteries, you don't really see too many places to eat, especially surrounding like the tombstones or the graves themselves, right? You might see like a picnic bench here and there, at least in the cemeteries in my neighborhood. But in Moldova, there is a holiday called Paștele Blajenilor, which is the week after Easter, where the whole village will go to celebrate the deceased, right, or in honor of the deceased. And they will put gifts, sometimes food. There's a bread, again, going back to bread, called colac, right? It's like a wreath. And they'll put that on the grave. They'll put maybe some like Easter eggs that they've painted from the week before. And then everybody exchanges like little gifts. So that might be, I went, one year I went and I received like slippers, I received a nightgown. They just buy these like cheaper things that people can then, again, it's showing appreciation for the deceased loved one. And I thought this was such a beautiful idea because you really bring everybody together to honor those who are no longer with us. But the thing that was surprising is that when I heard like, oh, you go and you eat at the cemetery, there are actually specific benches and tables set up around the tombstone, so it is more organized than I had first imagined. Like I thought we'd just be standing there, but you are sitting, everyone's exchanging wine, you're trying your neighbor's wine, or their food that they've provided. And it's not a full-on feast. It might be like a potato salad, with other like little traditional snack foods that, you don't have to just sit. You can pop from table to table and talk with everyone. So I really did enjoy that holiday. Number 5 is that you sometimes receive favors at funerals. So I remember actually an interesting story is that I had, when I moved to my permanent site, I went to a funeral the second day. It was very sad and obviously overwhelming, and you obviously feel bad for the person who had passed. And that was my first experience with a funeral. After everyone kind of goes into, there was a little hall that we had in the village, you eat, and then everyone is given a little plastic baggie that has candies, a little towel, like a face cloth towel, and then like a little bun, again, the bread, and then there was a candle stuck inside of it. And that's basically like a tiny gift telling, again, in honor of the deceased. And you all light the candle and you kind of lift it up, and then you blow it out, and that's when everyone kind of can leave and the event is over. And so I thought that was really interesting. And unfortunately, my host mother had lost someone close to her while I was there. And I also got to witness how she organized a funeral herself. And she went to a part of Moldova where things were sold a little bit cheaper. And she bought around 10 or 20 tea kettles for all of the people that were going to help her organize. They were the ones that received these nicer favors because they were also contributing. And then, like, I think for me, she gave me like a towel. Like, I got so many towels when I was in Moldova as well. That's like a popular thing to give as that gift. And so, but again, it's really nice. It's practical. I feel like in the United States, when we give gifts, sometimes they just sit around and you don't use them. But towels or a tea kettle, these are things that are nice gestures, and you can also use them. And I think it really ties into the whole, like, the collectivist perspective of Moldovan society, and how everyone is kind of, there's this idea of, especially in the village, I should say, that everyone is sort of looking out for each other and sort of protecting each other, and to a certain extent. And so I thought that was really funny, because we receive favors more so at maybe at a wedding or at a bridal shower, but the funeral I thought was also a really nice gesture. And I'm sure there are cases in the States where people might have done something similar. So those are my 5 surprising little facts from living in the Republic of Moldova for about 2 years. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments, or if anyone has any other opinions, that'd be great too. And in the description, I'm also going to put a link to my podcast, the Salsa.Sol.Food podcast, and to my Instagram. Please subscribe to subscribe to my channel and like the video, share it. And I'm wishing you lots of positive vibes during this time, lots of, health and good thoughts. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Ты казала у вівторок, поцілуєш разом з сорокою. Я прийшов тебе, нема, підманула, підвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела, ти ж мене молодого, з ума сразу назвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела, ти ж мене молодого, з ума сразу назвела. Казала у середу, підем разом.